Chibazanga. Joining me in the studio for Newsnight tonight is Holger Cray, the head Africa Agriculture Policy Unit with the World Bank, and he'll be having this discussion with us tonight. Well, a very warm welcome, Holger. Thank you for joining us tonight in the studio. All right. Well, let's jump right into it. 2014, Vision 2014 for Uganda. One of the priority areas that they continuously mention if we want to achieve middle income status by 2040 is agriculture. How are we doing on that front, considering that the report also mentions closing the potential? So we want to know what kind of potential do we have and how are we performing?
Agriculture, very rightly so, is a centerpiece of the Vision 2040. It is a very modern strategy, and it takes advantage really of the importance of the agriculture sector. Agriculture is not only income, agriculture is not only employment. Agriculture is Uganda's landscapes, and agriculture is also the food that Uganda produces. At this very point in time, I would say, despite what we often might have to criticize about the structure of agriculture, opportunities are almost unlimited. Never ever in the past history have opportunities for agriculture been as pronounced, as good as they have been. And this mainly comes from growing demand worldwide. There's a growing global population. They need food to consume.
Yeah.
And B, the changed consumer behavior. People in the cities demand different foods. They want more processed foods, they want more perishable foods, they want more packaged food. This is value addition, this is income for rural areas.
Well, we're speaking about opportunities, but are we tapping into these opportunities?
Unfortunately, growth in agriculture has been staying behind expectations. Agriculture has been growing at around 2%, population has been growing at 3% and more. So there's a disbalance. And if agriculture has performed a little better in the past, say, decade, then these were like punctual, the individual instances, higher food prices, expansion into land. We have yet to see a more systematic tapping into the opportunities that I just talked about. And this is what this report about. We all talk about the high potential that Uganda has, not only because of its good soils and its good people, also because of traffic infrastructure and its geolocation, and because it harvests twice a year. But we have not yet seen performance actually catching up with that potential.
Why do you think?
I think it is for a number of reasons. One is contextual. See, we live in a world of an ever-changing climate. Climate shocks become more pronounced, and every once in a while, droughts, flash floods impact also on agriculture production. But I have to say, and this is what this report discusses, part of this is also homebrew, homemade. We invite to think through whether the incentives are actually in place, whether there's actually reason for farmers who are very rational in their behavior to increase their productivity.
Did you say rational or irrational?
They are very rational individuals. Okay. You connect a farmer to this growing market, you let the farmer benefit of these better prices and the market opportunities, and you will see that the farmer will seek out his or her agro dealer and procure the inputs that they need to become more productive. Perhaps you have to add a little knowledge and education into that mix, but overall I'm very positive farmers are rational individuals.
They're very invested in what they're doing. We had our budget read last week, and generally it was about 32 trillion shillings. But agriculture was given about 800 billion shillings. Do you think that we are on our way to where we should be going?
Josephine, see, the nominal budget for agriculture has been declining somewhat over the past couple of years, but I would like to invite you to think with me less in terms of quantity, but more in terms of quality of spending. See, in terms of quantity, there is an allocation to the agricultural administration, and we've seen in the past couple of years that execution, so what the administration actually spends, stays well below the allocation. That hints to difficulties in project implementation, difficulties administrative on the ground, and if I was a Minister of Finance, I might interpret this as the ministry not actually needing what I allocated. But the main concern should be the quality of spending. I think it is meanwhile widely accepted that using 50% of the agriculture budget for the procurement and handing out of inputs, which quite often come at inappropriate time or at lower quality, might not be a path into the future, even if it has been a patch in the past.
Okay. Well, where do we go from here? I was looking at some of the barriers that were mentioned in the report, and I saw natural resource degradation, high vulnerability to the impacts of climate change, and so many other things. So where do we go to get on track? Do we embrace ICT? What do we do?
Yeah. See, this report is very implementation oriented. We really thought through how can this help a practical policymaker, a practical entrepreneur to define the next step. This is why we only come up with three, let me say, buckets of recommendations. Yeah. One is very clearly to continue pursuing commercialization through the private sector. Uganda is one of the leaders in unfolding private sector forces. Unfortunately, in agriculture, that has not yet fully been the case, and this report sort of recommends pathways to that. The other is a little bit of institutional reform, unfortunately, particularly in a sector that becomes more and more knowledge intense, where farmers need to be zoologists, botanists, pedologists, yes, mechanics, and so on and so forth. It is important they have knowledge, so advisory services become an extension, become a tremendously important part. The report outlines this. And the third, clearly focus on resilience. The climate situation will not get better in the short run. Uganda is among the poorest prepared countries, rank 155 out of 188 nations. This is sobering news. But see, the recipes to addressing this are on the table. They are available. Your local universities, your local research system has contributed to elaborating those, but it's again a case where the potential that lies in good policy and knowledge doesn't necessarily
implementation really.
Correct.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. Unfortunately, our time has quickly run out, but thank you very much. I've been speaking to Holger Kray, the head Africa Agriculture Policy Unit with the World Bank.
I thank you for the invitation, and this report is available for download. World Bank, Uganda.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the opportunity to mention that. Well, let's move on to other news. The Batwa people of southwestern Uganda have lived very traditional lives as hunters and gatherers for centuries. However, over the last few decades, they have found it increasingly impossible to continue living their traditional ways of life as population pressures and modernization increasingly impact on their lives. Now, some Batwa communities